Imagine a serial killer so ruthless that he didn't just kill for pleasure. He hunted down criminals, avenging victims who never got justice. A man who turned prison into his own personal hunting ground. This isn't a Hollywood movie. It's the terrifying true story of Pedro Rodrigues Filho, the killer of killers. But what drove him to become Brazil's most notorious vigilante murderer? Stay with me, because this story is more twisted than you can imagine. Pedro Rodrigues Filho was born into a world of violence. Even before he took his first breath, his fate was already being shaped by cruelty. His father, a violent man. His mother, a victim of relentless abuse. And Pedro? He was born with a fractured skull, because his father beat his mother while she was pregnant. Growing up in Brazil, Pedro witnessed violence at an age when most kids were learning how to read. But instead of fearing it, he embraced it. At just 13, he committed his first murder. The victim? A local politician who had fired his father over accusations of theft. But that was just the beginning. What turns a boy into a cold-blooded executioner? What pushed Pedro to kill over 100 people? And why did he only target criminals? Keep watching, because his method of justice was darker than anyone could have imagined. Pedro wasn't just a killer, he was an executioner. His targets? Drug dealers, rapists, murderers, anyone he deemed unworthy of life. But he didn't just kill them, he hunted them. One of his most infamous killings? When he stormed into a wedding party with 2 guns and shot down the men responsible for his cousin's death, right in front of dozens of horrified guests. But Pedro wasn't done. He tracked down and executed a gang of drug traffickers, one by one, leaving behind a trail of bodies. He once captured a criminal and forced him to confess, before butchering him. Another time, he killed a drug dealer and then casually ate a piece of his heart. But his thirst for revenge didn't stop in the streets. No, prison would become his personal hunting ground, and that's where his story takes an even darker turn. For years, Pedro roamed free, executing criminals while authorities struggled to catch him. Some even whispered that the police secretly approved of his actions. After all, he was doing their job for them. But eventually, his blood-soaked rampage came to an end. He was finally arrested in 1973. But here's the twist. Prison didn't stop him. It became his new playground. Pedro was sentenced to 128 years in prison. But Brazil's legal system had a loophole. No one could serve more than 30 years. While behind bars, he didn't just survive, he thrived. Within prison walls, he continued his killing spree, murdering fellow inmates he deemed unworthy. One time, he killed his cellmate simply because the man snored too loudly. Despite his blood-soaked past, Pedro was released in 2007 after serving 34 years. But could a man like him really walk free without spilling more blood? It didn't take long before Pedro was back behind bars. In 2011, he was arrested again, this time for crimes linked to riots and threats. But what's most disturbing? In his later years, Pedro claimed he had changed. He even started a YouTube channel, talking about his past and warning young people not to follow his path. But can a man with over 100 murders on his hands ever truly change? Or is the thirst for blood something that never really leaves? Let me know what you think in the comments. Was Pedro a necessary evil? A vigilante taking out the worst of society? Or was he just another cold-blooded killer? Hit that like button if you love true crime stories, and don't forge.